Hello, and welcome to the Students for Criminal Justice Reform podcast. My name is Sheba Rivera. I am the outgoing chair of the Wagner Students for Criminal Justice Reform at New York University. And I am also joined by Marissa Mack. She is a second-year executive MPA student at New York University's Wagner School of Public Service. And she is also our next year's Director of Innovation. So she's going to be carrying the torch and continuing these podcasts into the next year. Marissa, we're so happy to have you on board.
Thanks so much for having me, Sheba.
Great, and we're also joined by Janos Marton. He's the Director of Policy and Campaigns at Just Leadership. Janos is a born and raised New Yorker. He attended Dartmouth College. He worked on political campaigns, disaster relief, and then he came back and attended Fordham Law School. As an attorney, he's worked with a civil rights firm. He's worked as special counsel to the Moreland Commission to investigate public corruption and legal policy counsel to the Civilian Complaint Review Board. And now at Just Leadership USA, which is an amazing organization that empowers formerly incarcerated people to become agents for change. He's been leading the campaign to close Rikers, as well as leading local, state, and national initiatives designed to cut the U.S. Correctional population in half by 2030. So Janos, we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be with you.
Yes. And we're just going to jump right in because everyone's been very excited that the Mayor de Blasio has been able to recognize the need to shut down Rikers. And we're curious to hear your perspective. What do you think this looks like? What does it mean for people in the community, for people who are incarcerated, for people who work for Rikers? What do you think are the next steps, and what should we be concerned about going forward?
So Rikers Island has been a dangerous and corrupt and violent place since the day it opened in the 1930s, and generations of New Yorkers have endured all kinds of brutality there. So it really is a historic day for New Yorkers and for people who support criminal justice reform around the country, that Mayor de Blasio has made closing Rikers the official city policy following the work of the Close Rikers campaign. The Close Rikers campaign was founded in April of 2016, so it only took us a year to get the mayor to make this commitment. But of course, there have been many individuals and organizations who have been working on the issues around Rikers for decades. And so we stand on their shoulders as well, and couldn't have gotten to where we are today without the work of a lot of really impressive people and organizations. So when the mayor said that it was city policy to close Rikers, we want to celebrate that. We want to recognize how historic a moment that is. But we also have to be vigilant about making sure that the mayor actually follows through on his promise. So for example, when the mayor made his announcement, he pointedly chose not to endorse the Littman Commission recommendations. Now this is a commission that worked for a year coming up with the best possible solutions to how one would close Rikers and what the next steps would be. As an advocacy organization, we made sure to participate in all their community forums and testified in front of their commissioners. And so for the mayor to dismiss those recommendations and not come out with a plan of his own is a little bit troubling. And so we're very much keeping on top of the mayor, insisting that he produce his own plan for closing Rikers if he's not going to adopt the one that's already out there. Second of all, the mayor said that it'll take at least 10 years to close Rikers. And to us, that's a problematic timeline. 10 years is far too long. It's a political timeline that doesn't take into account how many things could happen right away to move towards closure. So we hope that the mayor adopts a more aggressive timeline and takes more steps right away to get us to the finish line. And then finally, we wanted some clarity from City Hall that they actually are serious by putting somebody in charge of this process. We know that closing Rikers will be complicated, but at the moment, it isn't even clear to us as advocates or to other stakeholders who at City Hall is in charge of this process. So we've been calling on the mayor to appoint someone to actually lead the process of closing Rikers. So those are some of the demands that are going on now. Our goal is not just to close a jail facility in Rikers, but really to reimagine a criminal justice system. So this is a really great moment in our city's history, but we have a long way to go to get the attendant reforms passed that get us to a different criminal justice landscape.
So Janos, I think one of the things that you stated is that there's really a long way to go in this process, and that shutting down Rikers is really just like the first step. So in terms of, and I want to say that is a huge win, a huge celebration. We know, everything that goes into and comes out of Rikers Island and the effects that, that facility has had on so many lives throughout, not even just New York, but, people that have left the city and are in other areas of the country. How does the closing of Rikers impact communities? What do you see happening if the city decides to open up, smaller facilities around the 5 boroughs? How do you think that will impact not only the individuals or the number of inmates and their treatment, but how do you think that will also affect the communities that some of those smaller proposed facilities would be in if this moves forward?
Sure, that's a good question. So the goal has never been, like I said, just to shutter a facility. The Close Rikers campaign has always been first and foremost about reducing the number of people that we lock up here in New York City. Mm-hmm. Back in the early to mid 90s, there used to be as many as 22 or 23,000 people who were held in New York in jails pre-trial. We've been able to cut that number as a city in half, down to about 10,000, but we're going to have to cut it in half again to make closing Rikers a reality. So today, as we speak, there are about 10,000 people who are in jails around the city, 7,800 or so of whom are at Rikers Island. So how do we cut that number down? We need to implement bail reform. That's an issue that a lot of people are talking about, and we know what the solutions are there. It isn't rocket science. We just need to stop criminalizing poverty and having district attorneys asking for and judges setting bail in situations where people aren't accused of serious crimes and aren't flight risks. Second of all, we need to work on speedy trial reform. That's a bill that we've been pushing in the state legislature, also called Khalif's Law, which talks about how we can reduce the amount of time people are sitting in jails, not just at Rikers, but really across New York State, waiting months, even years for their case to come to trial. So when you fix those two issues, you can get thousands of people off of Rikers, and other reforms get the population even lower to get to a place where you can close Rikers without really opening a significant number of facilities around the city. Right? Currently, we have facilities in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens that are right across the street from courthouses. So in our view, this is the view of the Lippman Commission, actually, and we agree with it, that the best place for small, humane facilities is right across from courthouses in the downtown part of boroughs, where they're easy to reach by family members and really accessible to lawyers who are able to actually visit their clients, which they aren't able to do today at Rikers. So now to your question about how this will impact other communities around the city. Again, I think any time that you can bring the few people who will still end up in our jail system closer to home is better, right? So if you have people who are charged with offenses in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn house pre-trial, that means that their loved ones can visit them by taking pretty much any train to the Atlantic Avenue area. If you have people charged with offenses in Manhattan at the Manhattan house, then pretty much anybody can get to Lower Manhattan by subway. And of course, lawyers just have to go, in a tunnel underground right across the courthouse to go visit their clients, as opposed to having to take 3 or 4 hours to visit them on Rikers Island. So we think it'll be a net gain for everybody in the system, involved with the system, to have Rikers be a thing of the past. Now, in terms of communities that have been most impacted by policing and mass incarceration, places like the South Bronx, East Harlem, where our office is based, East New York and Brownsville, there's concern in some of those communities that there might be a jail facility built there. But to be honest, we as a campaign are not in favor of putting jails in places like East New York, Brownsville. We don't think that makes sense. We think the Lippman recommendation to have small, humane facilities near courthouses and downtown parts of boroughs is actually the way to go. And so, whether to people in East New York and Brownsville or people in Harlem, if they try to put a facility in those neighborhoods, we would oppose that.
Perfect. So I guess it's great that you mentioned bail reform, and that is obviously something that is, as you stated, just like a direct, you know, hurt to a lot of communities in terms of just, you know, working to get up the money to allow someone bail, or to, you know, have them not waiting in Rikers, or you know, waiting at a certain precinct, or, you know, for a certain amount of time. Besides bail reform, I wanted to talk to you about raise the age. And how do you think that that might actually be an impact on shutting down Rikers, and, you know, just the overall, you know, system?
Sure. Well, you know, there are many groups that worked really hard on Raise the Age for a very long time. And so, you know, we all know that the final compromise version that came out this year was not perfect by any means. But at least New York is no longer, you know, in the ignominious position of being one of 2 states that prosecutes 16-year-olds as adults for all charges. The part of the legislation that we were actually quite fixated on at the end is where are the 16 and 17-year-olds who wind up in our criminal justice system going to be while their cases are being run through the system? And for us, it was extremely important that 16 and 17-year-old kids do not, under any circumstance, wind up in adult facilities. You know, my own experience, you know, on Rikers was working with 16, 17-year-olds there. And it was just horrific to me that you could have 16-year-olds in, you know, deep in the bowels, and literally, you know, multiple floors below the ground, in one of the most dangerous jails in the United States. And so one of the consequences of the legislation is that as of October 1st, 2018, there will no longer be any 16-year-olds on Rikers Island. And as of October 1st, 2019, there will no longer be any 17-year-olds on Rikers Island. So that is great news. And that means that, you know, at least those kids are going to get off of Rikers, you know, even if we're not finished with closing the rest of Rikers. So yeah, like I said, raise the age, the legislation was not perfect. I don't think anybody's really arguing that it was, but it's a step in the right direction. You know, kids never should have been on Rikers in the first place, and pretty soon they legally won't be allowed to set foot on it.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, because obviously if we're not putting those individuals in Rikers, that helps to lessen the number and get closer to the goal number of people that, you know, well, you know, are currently imprisoned, and half of them for non-offensive crimes. So if we can actually look at that as a way to reduce the number of people that are potentially being affected by Rikers, and the people that are in there, then all the more to move forward in that direction. I am very interested, you know, in the Leading with Conviction program that you offer, that Just Leadership offers. And I'm wondering if you could, you know, really talk a little bit about how that works. You know, what are the requirements to get into the fellowship program? And, you know, how do people become connected, and what are the benefits of participating? Because, you know, we know that entering back into the system is part of that number, right? That's part of that number that's counting, you know, how many people are actually in Rikers at a certain point in time. But it seems that your program here really helps individuals kind of move on a different path and give back. Are you able to talk a little bit about that initiative?
Yeah, sure. So Leading with Conviction is Just Leadership's, I'd say, you know, flagship leadership training program, working with formerly incarcerated leaders around the United States. So I'm going to pivot a little bit away from the Rikers Island conversation for this, because it is actually a national program. You know, so Glenn Marton, our founder and president of Just Leadership, he spent 6 years in the New York State prison. And when he came home, he ended up working at Legal Action Center, and eventually he became the vice president of the Fortune Society. And as he became a national spokesperson on issues of criminal justice, he would very often be, you know, the formerly incarcerated guy on the panel, the formerly incarcerated guy at the conference. And he, along with, you know, a select small number of other formerly incarcerated leaders, were constantly the go-tos for every policy issue and every conversation. He thought there was really something wrong with that even though we know from history that successful movements have to be led by people who are most directly impacted. Very often when it comes to criminal justice, we have these conversations about what we need to do to reform the system and leave out the voices of those directly impacted. And so Just Leadership is always aiming to elevate those voices in the discussion, whether it's here locally on the Close Rikers campaign or nationally. And so what Leading with Conviction is a program, it's a competitive program that you have to apply to, like many other fellowships across different professions. And this year we accepted 36 fellows from 18 states. In total, over the last 3 years, we've had fellows from 28 states and Washington, D.C. And these are all formerly incarcerated leaders who, it's not like they just came home, right? That's not quite what this program is. We have other leadership training programs that are more sort of meant to be for general audiences of formerly incarcerated people. This is a program specifically for people who have come home and really demonstrated leadership in their communities in the criminal justice space. Now, if you get out of New York or California, there aren't a lot of people with the title, criminal justice advocate in some of these spaces. They might have a day job with a more straightforward name than that. But we can tell by the work that they do that they really are organizers and advocates and activists and leaders in their communities. And so the goal of this program is not to create leaders, it's to identify leaders, bring them to New York for intensive training, and to really elevate their leadership, whether it's public speaking, management, coalition building, dealing with crisis. These are the kind of management tools that we invest in for leaders in all different areas of business and politics and even nonprofit management. But very often, people who are formerly incarcerated don't have access to these tools. So really the goal is to take, if you could see me visually, right, it's taking somebody from high up to even higher, right? We're not building up leaders from the bottom here. We're taking people who are already very impressive folks. Just to give a few examples, one of our previous Leading with Conviction fellows is now a deputy director at the ACLU, and he was one of the people instrumental for the ACLU's work in Philadelphia, where they just elected an extremely progressive district attorney who's going to really reform the criminal justice system there. We have another fellow from Alaska who was the advocate standing with the governor when he signed legislation overhauling Alaska's sentencing laws. We have another fellow who was the second formerly incarcerated person ever hired by the Justice Department, who coordinated the reentry task force at the Justice Department. So these are people who really show up in important ways. And I think to get to your part of your question, what is the what do people get from the Leading with Conviction program? In addition to the skills that I mentioned, the most important thing that they get from the program is community with each other, knowing that there are other formerly incarcerated leaders who are not only doing the same great work that they're doing, but also dealing with the same challenges, right? Challenges that formerly incarcerated people have, whether it's fundraising, whether it's getting respect that they deserve in professional circles, whether it's getting hired for positions and then being fired like a few days later when HR does a background check on something that happened in their lives 20 years ago. Or in the case of a famous story of Glenn Martin's, is he was invited to the White House to speak in a roundtable conversation, and found that when he got there, he wasn't actually permitted in because he had a criminal record, and he had to stand in the hallway and wait for, a 20-something-year-old intern to come out and escort him past security while the rest of his colleagues had gone on to the conversation. So this is really the best part about Leading with Conviction, is the opportunity for these leaders to get to know each other and be supportive of each other in their work.
I read some of the bios actually of individuals that are participating for this cohort, and it was just so impressive. Just reading that, I read one person's bio who said they had, re-entered about 46 times, or had been in and out about 46 times. And he's now, doing some amazing work as a leader. And, some people have gone back to their communities to try to help and serve in that way. And I think that's just amazing that you offer this program to help keep them going, and to be surrounded by other formerly incarcerated individuals who, are encouraging and are leading the way and saying, this is something, keep going, you can do this, and, don't let whatever happen previously stop you from being a leader and moving forward in today's society. So I really applaud you guys on that initiative and having that group of support, and also offering the training to individuals who are formerly incarcerated. I also wanted to kind of, I guess, veer off in the direction of, I know you stated that these individuals are already leaders. What do you think about people that formerly incarcerated individuals that come out? What types of support do they need coming out of Rikers, or coming out of a particular situation that you feel is most important as we move forward with the Close Rikers initiative? What are the ways that communities, families, churches are able to support formerly incarcerated individuals as they transition out of their previous situation?
I mean, it always comes back to jobs and housing, right? People who come home, very often they want to get work. They often owe money to the government. They often want to be independent again, and it's so hard for people in those situations to get employment. It's not as if it wouldn't be challenging enough, just with normal barriers that people face, but the fact that there are all kinds of professions that formerly incarcerated people are barred from, the fact that New York is moving in the right direction on banning the box, but still there's an enormous stigma about people who have been formerly incarcerated that prevents them from even getting low-level jobs at places that they would easily be able to do the work. And so whether it's changing laws around what kind of about what professions we're banning people from entering, or just on a non-legal basis, just shifting the culture so that employers recognize that being discriminatory in this setting is completely counterproductive. The most important thing is just people want to get back on their feet. They want to get to work. And then housing is related to that. Of course, like especially in New York City, I mean, housing is a non-starter if you're not working. But even if you are, the housing barriers that formerly incarcerated people face just make it really tough to get back on your feet again. So as with most people, if you ask them who are struggling, you ask them what they could need help with, it's, work and the resources that come from work, and housing and the stability that comes from housing. So it's no different for formerly incarcerated people. It's just that they face more legal challenges than most in those areas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess also just looking at, what we do as we move forward, what kind of steps, if everybody's all in, if everybody is working towards closing Rikers, I guess what are the roles that certain people play? So what roles could Sheba and I play as, she's now alumni and I a current student at NYU. What roles could the community board play in, in getting the word out, or, actually making this happen? What are the roles that I guess certain sections of the community can play in helping this initiative?
Sure, thanks for asking that. So first of all, anybody can go to closerikers.org, closerikers.org, and sign up to be a part of the campaign, and you'll get updates on what we're up to, and an organizer will check in and try to figure out the best way to get you involved depending on your interests and your skill set and where you live and all of that. In terms of what other categories of folks can do, I mean, community boards can play a huge role in spreading the word to their local communities about what is and isn't happening. I think there's a lot of fear and confusion in certain communities about jail sightings and things like that. We're very much trying to have a calm conversation with the community about what closing Rikers means. But obviously, when it comes to issues like this, some communities can be very sensitive, and there are a lot of rumors that are untrue that can spread, and the community board is in a good position to lead that measured conversation and not react to misleading rumors. And so, especially in communities that are impacted like East Harlem, that would be really helpful. And then, when it comes to campuses, I mean, one of the best things about colleges and universities is the exchange of ideas, the amount of panel discussions and meetings and speeches on important issues. And NYU's done so many interesting programs over the last few years around criminal justice, that just to keep that conversation going, to invite not just the Close Rikers campaign, but other people who are doing bold work in criminal justice into the campus space to to talk to students, to talk to faculty, and to talk to the community about where we need to go from here.
Thank you so much. I love how you said that. We also think it's very important to keep that dialogue alive. We had people asking, is Rikers Island even still an important issue anymore? And there was a huge group of people at NYU Wagner who said, yes, we're still interested in hearing what's going to happen. Even with the mayor saying, yes, it needs to be closed. What's next? What does it mean? What does this mean? So really glad to have you on here. And we really hope that we can connect next year also. And as someone who's been to a lot of your rallies, I understand how important this is and how we need to march. We need to keep the conversation going. So I hope you can let us know when you need people to show up and be a voice for change.
And Janos, I would really like to invite you to a community board meeting, and Sheba too, if you want to come to our same meeting, that would be great. If you want to talk at our economic development section, that would be awesome. And then also, as we continue programming through NYU for this upcoming year, there may be other opportunities for panel discussion or another speaking engagement that we'd love to invite you to participate in.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you both for your support and being so informed on this issue. It's been really great talking to you.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Okay, great. Thank you. Have a great day.